Well, there's something very attractive to me about someone who is a little bit crazy, as in the sense that she's a little bit mad with inspiration. Like in her presence, I sense that a fire is burning. Her imagination is alive. Her capacity for wonder is intact. And when she laughs with her whole being. Less attractive is someone whose persona is so controlled and contained that he dampens and deadens wherever he goes. His talk and presence tends to put the fire out. One might ask upon meeting somebody like this, like, where's the fire? Like, what happened to you? Who stomped the life out of you? Or did you do that to yourself? Now, for me, I like daily doses of madness, as in like a little bit here and a little bit there. But sometimes I love to be quite swept away, like right out of my mind, mad with inspiration, which is how I feel sometimes when I'm writing or teaching, absorbed in music or meditating. Plato in the Phaedrus describes a breakthrough experience of going past the limitations of the mind into a state of what he called mania. And Plato regarded this state of mania as man's highest good. He called it God mania or theomania, a God intoxicated, inspired state of being. He described this God-given state of being as beside oneself. Alan Watts used to say that we human beings need to go out of our minds at least once a day. If not, we remain inwardly clogged, trapped, and depressed until finally ending up vacantly staring into space, drooling. Surely, therefore, it's a high priority to experience a daily sense of being catapulted out of our prisons of self-sufficiency into holy, ecstatic, and transcendent states of being. Indeed, if we're lucky, says Professor Michael Sugrue in his lecture on Plato's Phaedrus, The Hymn to Love, we will remain in such an inspired state for all of our days, like a holy maniac forever. It's thus our great good fortune to experience on a regular basis some sense of being out of our minds and beside ourselves, which is an essential state. Otherwise, like, why go on? I mean, what's the point if there's no joy? Now, what's interesting to me is paradoxically, in a state of mania where one has become dislodged and dispossessed from one's ordinary sense of mind and self, one actually goes more deeply into the mind and self and finds consequently greater clarity and a sense of wholeness, which is to say that through losing your mind and self, it appears actually that that's about finding your mind and self. You lose your life in order to find your life, which is my idea of true religion, that when you've found the real thing, that you lose nothing that matters and gain everything that does matter. The one who finds true religion, in my estimate, finds himself truly. He comes to his senses, like the experience of the prodigal son. And that includes all of his senses, including extrasensory capacities. Hitherto sick in the soul, disordered, scattered, and fragmented, a man now finds through true religion an inner coherence, a sense of it all coming together. A formerly chaotic soul now finds a dynamic inner peace. Now, friends and relations may well think that we earnest practitioners of the art of divine madness are indeed crazed maniacs in the efforts we make to participate in various religious rites and rituals. Well, we are content to be so regarded. Call us fools, nuts, or maniacs if you like. We don't care, for we enjoy being crazed. We wouldn't trade it for how you spend your time, for we've been there and done that and prefer a state of inspired madness any day rather than a deadly, worldly sanity. Thus, we choose with Plato this inspired madness. More mania, please. Now, Plato in the Phaedrus writes about 4 forms of divine insanity. The first inspired madness is related to prophetic utterances. It's said, for example, about the Sibyl, a prophetess, that the Delphian god Apollo breathed in her the richness of the Spirit. Thus inspired, her guiding utterances could be life-transforming. A few words from the Sibyl could change your life forever. Many words, in contrast, from someone whose soul is frozen will leave you cold, empty, and without a sense of direction. Now, interestingly, you can find this emphasis on the necessity of a state of divine intoxication in the writings of all people, St. Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas wrote of persons able to deliver revelatory words because they've been lifted up by a higher power. Joseph Pieper, an expert on Aquinas, remarks that Aquinas himself, commonly regarded as the accepted model of the most unimpassioned rationality, regarded rationality as a limited way of knowing. In other words, the point is that mere rationality must be transcended into poetic realms of experience and meaning. St. Thomas always understood that prophetic words with power come only from an inspired ecstatic state. So, Plato and Aquinas, with one accord in this regard. The second form of divine mania discussed in Plato's Phaedrus is cathartic mania. Plato thought that the condition of our souls is such that we require a deep purging, a catharsis. Only a God-inspired experience of mania will do the job. Plato was so sensitive in this regard, sensitive to the scars that human beings carry, what yoga calls the scars that are buried inside of us. He makes reference to inner pain so severe that it can only be accounted for as some kind of psychic inheritance. There are, says Plato, those sore plagues and dire afflictions which linger in certain families as the wrath of some old ancestral guilt. So however might such a level of old ancestral guilt and the sense of doom it engenders ever be purged? Like, how are you going to get rid of that which is so severe? Well, it's said in the Phaedrus that mania devised a remedy for this inherited soul sickness. So Plato's perspective is that the divinely appointed mania alone is able to relieve the person of his ancient inherited burden. No other solution will do. One evening, the writer Sheldon Van Auken came home to find his young wife, Davy, shaken up and weeping because, as she explained to him, all her sins had paraded before her all evening long. And he, as a young husband, didn't know what to do. He couldn't relate. He'd never gone to such depths himself. But it was soon realized that she required a soul catharsis, a purging comparable to Plato's remedy. So Plato's point is to say that there are conditions of the soul so desperate that nothing else will cure but a divine remedy with its unique power to purge and to purify. For the fact is, says Joseph Pieper, that man is unable to free himself from these burdens of soul by means of mere rational technique. No, on the contrary, says Pieper, such an attempt would render the burden even more burdensome. Liberation can only occur through the process of healing characterized by the necessity for the one desiring healing to relinquish the steering wheel of rational self-control and self-possession. Like he's got to let go. In other words, the iron grip of one's mind upon the soul must first be interrupted and then broken to allow for a divinely inspired purge. Moving on here now, Plato's third form of inspired madness in the Phaedrus is its expression through poetry. It's understood in the Phaedrus that genuine and grand poetry is not possible unless born out of, guess what? Divine madness. The poetry, it is said, of those who are reasonable and sensible fades into obscurity before the poetry of those who speak in the ecstasy of being beside oneself. A case in point, says Pieper, is that of the poet Rilke, about whom his biographer says, Rilke is the quintessential figure of a poet in the simple sense of being a vessel for divine inspiration. I mean, that's the true poet, somebody divinely inspired. One necessarily has to believe this in order to do justice to Rilke, says the biographer. No other explanation is adequate to account for the power of Rilke's writings. Surely it is thought these inspired words of this poet had a divine origin. Goethe, too, understood that the true poet is someone who is out of his senses. His condition is altogether a trance. Now, fourthly, the fourth form of inspired madness in Plato's Phaedrus is erotic experience. As Goethe says in The Spirit of the Phaedrus, when I beheld this maiden, when my heart yearned for her, a whole new world of beauty and excellence unfolded before me. This eros, thus eros, properly understood, is the awakening of holy longing. That's the meaning of erotica. It's the awakening of holy longing. As Michael Segru states, when Dante saw Beatrice, he was never the same again. Her physical beauty awakened in him a longing for the ultimate, for the divine, for transcendental beauty. This is the madness of love. We see beauty here on earth and long for heavenly beauty. And when this holy longing is awakened, when that's stirred up, Plato says, we grow wings and are able to rise heavenward. We fly up out of the dark caves we've been living in. We've been what he calls blessedly afflicted, a great state to be in, and determined never again to go back to the darkness of the cave. In the Phaedrus it says that those who have had only a partial initiation don't understand. They've had a glimpse of the light, a little taste of it. They've had a tiny portion of holy longing, but they continue to be preoccupied with pleasures, and they miss the possible joy that could be theirs. They've missed the point of life. They've only dabbled a little bit in spiritual practices perhaps, but remain bound. They're pleasure-oriented, not oriented towards joy and bliss. So they've missed the bliss. And, the image that comes into my mind, because I saw this on TV not a while ago, and you don't want to watch this for very long, what I observed was the sapless old playboy Hef continuing to hobble around with his troop of busty, brainless babes. That's not erotic love on display. This is something cheap and base. It's the opposite of what's being described in the Phaedrus, where it's said that about that kind of focus that our wings shrink and disappear because of foulness and ugliness. We lose the ability to transcend. In the spirit, however, of the truly erotic, again, the deepest meaning of the erotic is the experience of a shared divine madness. That's what's shared with another human being at the highest level. Two lovers, true lovers, help each other to grow wings that take them heavenward. That's the nature of true love. They want only the best for each other, and the best is about the experience of a shared, inspired madness. Well, I pray that in all of our relations, we will have the effect of kindling each other's hearts to participate more fully in this wonderfully inspired insanity.